All right, ready for another deep dive.
Let's do it.
Today, we're going deep into a Reddit thread, and it all revolves around this proverb. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth.
Oof, that's a powerful one.
Right, and what's fascinating is that people in this thread weren't just talking about the proverb, like, theoretically.
Mm.
They were sharing their own stories, moments where they actually felt that kind of desperate need for connection.
Yeah, even if it meant, lashing out.
Exactly. It really gets you thinking about it, how powerful that unmet need can be.
Absolutely. So are we going to hear some of these stories?
Oh, we are. Get ready, because some of them are pretty intense.
Okay, hit me.
The first one that really stuck with me was from a user named RandomK300,
Okay.
and she talks about growing up with a mother battling drug and alcohol addiction.
Right.
But it goes way beyond just the addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her mother actively favored her siblings, and she subjected RandomK300 to just relentless emotional abuse.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking name-calling, being ignored for days,
Oh my God.
even being told straight up, "I hate you."
To her face.
Yeah. Imagine hearing that from your own mother.
Especially as a kid, that's got to be so damaging.
Right. And you start to see how that village almost becomes the source of the pain.
Yeah, the thing that needs to be, burned down.
Exactly. And that's the feeling you get from Random K300's story. She was so desperate for her mother's love, for just any positive attention,
Mm.
that she started plotting to kill her brother.
Wow.
She actually thought if her siblings were gone,
Yeah.
then she'd finally have her mother's love all to herself.
That's chilling.
I know, right? Like, talk about a lack of love distorting a child's thinking.
It's almost like the need for connection just becomes this overwhelming force that can lead to, well, terrifying things.
Yeah, and it wasn't just some, hypothetical scenario.
Yeah.
Random K300 actually went as far as crushing up her sister's pain pills and mixing them into her brother's juice.
Oh my God, she was actually going to poison him.
She was moments away from doing it.
It's like she was trying to orchestrate this whole tragedy just to force her mom's affection
Right.
to be the only source of comfort.
It's wild. And thankfully, at the very last second, she stopped herself.
Oh, thank goodness.
She snatched the drink back, spilled it, and her brother, who was already high on his own meds, just flew into a rage.
That's intense.
It was chaos, a total near miss, but it really could have ended so much worse.
I can't even imagine. I mean, it just really highlights how much potential there is for, devastation when a child's basic needs are ignored.
For sure. And it reminds us that that whole burning village metaphor, it isn't always about, outward aggression,
Yeah.
It can also be about manipulating a situation just to get that desperately craved warmth, even if it comes at a terrible cost.
Absolutely. So what was the next story that stood out to you?
Okay, this one is completely different. It's from a user named Actual Gussie, and it's about growing up with a father who was emotionally distant, almost like a ghost in his own home.
Oh, wow. So this is like a different kind of burning village.
Exactly. It's not about a literal burning or anything like that,
Right.
but it's about that slow, corrosive effect of feeling invisible.
But you just don't matter.
Exactly. And Actual Gussie talks about how her father favored her siblings, giving them nicknames and celebrating all their achievements.
Oh, wow.
Meanwhile, she felt completely overlooked.
Like she didn't exist.
Right. And she tried everything to gain his approval.
Like what?
She tried cuddling up to him, making him gifts, excelling in school, everything, but nothing seemed to, break through that wall of indifference.
It's like he just wasn't capable of giving her what she needed.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking. She even describes him as a brat, emotionally immature,
Wow. So the village, in this case, was almost emotionally bankrupt.
Exactly. And eventually, that constant feeling of being overlooked, it just took its toll.
Yeah, I can imagine.
She realized that her father simply didn't like her.
Oh, wow.
And she made this conscious decision to stop seeking his approval. She even wrote, "We were never going to have a healthy father-daughter relationship."
There's so much resignation in those words.
Right. She's essentially choosing to burn down any expectation of ever having a loving relationship with him.
It's almost like a quiet act of rebellion.
Yes. And then, get this, years later, after Actual Gussie had her own son,
Yeah.
her father tries to rekindle their relationship.
Really?
He suddenly wants to be a grandfather, but for her, it's too late.
The damage is done.
Exactly. And what's even crazier is she says she only found peace after her father's death.
Wow. So the very thing that caused her so much pain is finally gone?
It's heavy, right? Like that's the enduring impact of emotional neglect. It shapes you.
It's like those invisible scars, those burned villages we carry inside.
And it makes you wonder how many people are out there with those scars.
Right. And it makes you think about how burning down the village can manifest in so many different ways.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's not about outward aggression, but those quiet acts of self-preservation.
Letting go and seeking fulfillment elsewhere.
Okay, so ready for a story where burning down the village takes on a more literal meaning.
Hit me.
This one's from Seas Diver, who works in dog rescue.
Oh, wow. So I bet this one's tough.
Yeah, it paints a pretty grim picture of how humans treat animals.
And I guess the burned villages are all those abused and neglected animals they encounter.
Exactly. It's like they're constantly surrounded by the aftermath of someone else's destructive actions.
That's gotta be rough.
Seas Diver talks about seeing horrific acts of cruelty
Oh.
and the scars they leave behind.
Yeah, it's like a constant reminder of the dark side of humanity.
Right. And you can just feel that rage in their words. Like, how do you stay sane when you're facing that kind of injustice every day?
Yeah, how do you resist just wanting to burn it all down?
And that's what's so powerful about their story. Seas Diver chooses to channel that anger into healing.
So instead of succumbing to the rage,
They rescue and rehabilitate abused animals.
wow, they're literally rebuilding those burned villages one dog at a time.
It really highlights the power of choice. Even when you're surrounded by all that metaphorical ash,
You can choose to rebuild.
create a world where those flames are extinguished by compassion.
It's inspiring.
Totally. Now, this next story,
Yeah.
this one takes us to a village that often claims to be supportive and welcoming. Church.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. You'd think a church would be the epitome of a supportive village.
Right. But this story from Tess Patience Guest
Yeah.
shows how even those seemingly idyllic communities can fall short.
In what way?
Well, their dad had been diagnosed with cancer, and they naturally turned to their church pastor for guidance and comfort.
Makes sense.
But instead of compassion, they felt ignored and dismissed. Like their pain didn't matter.
Oh, wow. It's like even in a community that preaches love and compassion, people can still feel isolated.
Yeah, especially in times of crisis.
So what happened with Patience Test and their dad?
Well, the pastor announced to the whole congregation that their dad was sick,
Okay.
but then focused almost entirely on a woman whose horse was ill.
A horse? Seriously?
Yeah. The congregation rallied around the woman, offering condolences and support,
Wow.
while Patience Test and their family were basically forgotten.
It's almost like the community's empathy had a limit.
Right. And as a result, they were left to deal with their grief alone.
It's so sad. Like they were an outsider in a place that should have been a source of comfort.
Yeah, it makes you question a community's priorities sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder Patience Test never went back to that church.
It's a reminder that even well-intentioned communities can fail to provide support when it's most needed.
And it highlights the need for a deeper sense of empathy,
Being able to recognize and respond to the unique needs of each individual.
especially in times of crisis.
Exactly. So, are we ready for another story?
Yeah, let's shift gears a bit and look at a system that's meant to be a safety net for vulnerable individuals. The foster care system.
This should be interesting.
It is. This story comes from Man Like Your Realities, and it doesn't hold back about the realities of being a child in that system.
Okay, lay it on me.
So they describe being abandoned at a youth shelter.
Abandoned.
Yeah, after their mother was hospitalized and their father went to prison.
Oh my gosh. Imagine being a child dealing with all that trauma and then being dumped into a system that's supposed to protect you.
It's rough.
Yeah.
And they don't hold back about their criticism of the system either.
What do they say?
They talk about violence, substance abuse, even sexual assault they witnessed at the shelter.
Oh, wow.
And the sheer stupidity of some staff members who seemed clueless about the real needs of the teenagers in their care.
It's like the system itself becomes another source of pain.
Right. But what's really striking is that Man Like Realities ended up working within that same system.
Real.
Yeah, it's like they decided to try and rebuild that village from within.
To make it a place that truly serves the needs of those who rely on it.
Exactly. And they share a story about meeting a 16-year-old girl on a train.
Okay.
She was clearly in distress, talking about needing money for a termination.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
Yeah. And Man Like Realities, they didn't just walk away.
What did they do?
They connected her with social services, downloaded resources onto her phone, helped her figure out health care.
That's amazing.
Right. It's a perfect example of how one person's empathy can make a difference.
Absolutely. And it underscores their whole message that we can and must do better for these kids.
It's a reminder that even within broken systems, individuals can make a difference.
And a challenge to think about how we can create a more compassionate world for those who need it most.
For sure. So, ready for a story that takes us into a village that often claims to be built on love and acceptance?
Okay, sure. What is it?
Family.
Ah, I see where this is going.
This one, from Nocturnal Animal, is about coming out as LGBTQ+.
In a culture where that's not exactly embraced.
Yeah. They describe growing up knowing that coming out would probably mean being ostracized by their family.
That's awful. To feel like you have to choose between being yourself and your family.
It's tough. And for years, Nocturnal Animal hid their true self.
Just to maintain a sense of belonging.
Exactly. But eventually that pressure became too much,
Yeah.
and they decided to come out.
How did they do it?
They updated their social media to reflect their true identity.
Wow, that's brave.
But it came at a cost.
What happened?
Their family cut them off.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's tragic, but unfortunately it's a reality for a lot of LGBTQ plus individuals. Their village turned its back on them.
But what happened to Nocturnal Animal?
Well, their story also offers some hope.
Oh, good.
They describe finding their own chosen family, friends, and allies who give them that love and acceptance,
It's like they built a new village.
brick by brick, with people who celebrate their true self.
That's beautiful. And it reminds us that sometimes burning down the village can mean walking away from environments that don't serve us.
And seeking out those who see and value us for who we truly are.
Exactly. So is there another story?
Yeah, our last one today takes us to the world of academia.
Ooh, academia.
Yeah.
Another village with its own set of dynamics.
Right. This one's from the only Reddit account, and it's about feeling overlooked and undervalued by their family, despite achieving a lot academically.
It's like they were trying to earn their love, or at least their respect.
Exactly. And it's even more complicated because the only Reddit account is transgender.
Okay, so there's another layer to this.
They came out to their parents,
Yeah.
and their identity was basically dismissed. Like it was just inconvenient.
Oh, wow. That's rough.
It shows how societal prejudices can seep into families, creating an environment where someone doesn't feel safe to be themselves.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, but amidst all this, their story takes a heartwarming turn.
Oh, good. What happened?
They met their future wife in the United States, and it's like they finally found that love and acceptance they'd been missing.
The power of finding your tribe.
Right. But even with that support, they continued to face challenges with their family.
Like what?
Well, they returned to Ireland to finish their degree,
Okay.
and their sister was really hostile.
Why?
It seemed like she resented their achievements.
That's so messed up.
I know. But finally, they had this explosive confrontation with their sister and father.
They finally snapped.
Basically. They called them out on their behavior, the whole toxic environment.
Good for them. Sometimes you got to burn it all down.
And in the end, the only Reddit account decided to leave Ireland and start a new life with their wife in the U.S.
They walked away from the negativity.
Yeah, they chose to build a life where they could be themselves, surrounded by people who value them.
That's a powerful ending.
It is. And it brings us back to that idea that the village isn't always a physical place.
Right.
It's about those connections we forge.
The relationships that nourish us.
Exactly. And sometimes burning down the village means letting go of what's hurting us.
And creating a space where we can finally be ourselves.
I think that's a good place to leave it for now.
Yeah, lots to think about.
Definitely. It's amazing how that whole village thing, it can apply to so many different places, right?
Yeah, for sure. We've seen it with families, workplaces, even those systems like the one suing Rye 423 was up against.
But what about those communities that are supposed to be like all about support? Like a church, for example.
Oh, that's interesting. You'd think a church would be the ultimate village, right?
Totally. But this story from Test Patients Test, it shows how even those places can, fall short.
Oh, really? What happened?
So their dad had been diagnosed with cancer, and they turned to their church pastor for support.
Okay, that makes sense.
But instead of getting that compassion they were looking for, they felt ignored.
Wow, that's rough. Like, even in a community that's all about love, you can still feel alone.
Right. And what really got to me was this one detail. The pastor announced to the whole congregation that Patient's Test's dad was sick,
Okay.
but then went on to focus almost entirely on a woman whose horse was ill.
Seriously, a horse?
Yeah. And Everyone rallied around the woman, offering condolences and support, while test patients' tests and their family were just, like, forgotten.
Oh, wow. That's messed up.
Right. It's like the community's empathy just, I don't know, had a limit or
It's
something.
like they had a script for certain situations, but anything outside of that, they didn't know what to do.
Yeah, it's wild. So test patients' test was left to deal with their grief alone. It's no wonder they never went back.
It's tragic. Even well-intentioned communities can fail to provide genuine support, like when it's most needed.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we need to cultivate a deeper sense of empathy, right?
Absolutely. Being able to really see and respond to each person's unique needs.
Okay, so shifting gears again, let's look at another system that's meant to be a safety net, the foster care system.
Okay, yeah, this is a big one.
This story comes from Man-Like Realities, and they're very open about the realities of being a child in that system.
So what's their experience?
Well, they describe being abandoned at a youth shelter
Abandoned? By who?
after their mother was hospitalized and their father went to prison.
Oh my God. Imagine being a child and going through all that.
It's intense, and they talk about violence, substance abuse, even sexual assault at the shelter.
Oh, wow. That's terrible.
Yeah, and they even criticize the staff, calling them clueless about the kids' real needs.
So it's like the system that's supposed to help is actually hurting them.
Exactly. But here's the crazy part. Man-Like Realities ended up working within that system.
Really? Why would they do that?
It's like they wanted to try and change it from within, you know?
To make it better for the kids who are still there.
Right. And they share a story about meeting a 16-year-old girl on a train.
Okay.
The girl was having a meltdown, talking about needing money for termination.
Oh man, that's heavy.
And Man-Like Realities didn't just ignore her.
What did they do?
They connected her with social services, helped her find resources, healthcare, everything.
That's amazing. They really stepped up.
Yeah. And it really drives home their point. We need to do better for these kids.
We have to create a better world for them.
Absolutely. So this last story for today's deep dive, it takes us into a village that should be all about love and acceptance. Family.
I have a feeling this is going to be a tough one.
It is. This story comes from Nocturnal Animal, and it's about coming out as LGBTQ plus crimp.
Okay, yeah, in a culture where that's not always easy.
Exactly. They knew that coming out could mean losing their family.
That's a horrible position to be in, having to choose between being yourself and your family.
Yeah, it's rough. And for years, Nocturnal Animal kept it all inside.
Just to try and fit in.
Right. But eventually, they decided they couldn't keep hiding.
So they came out?
Yep. They updated their social media to reflect their true identity.
That's a brave move.
It was. But it came at a cost. Their family cut them off.
Seriously. That's awful.
Yeah, it's a reality a lot of LGBTQ plus people face. Their village rejects them.
But what happened to Nocturnal Animal? Did they find support elsewhere?
Their story does have some hope. They talk about finding a chosen family, friends, and allies who accept them for who they are.
It's like they built their own village.
One that celebrates their true self. And it reminds us that sometimes burning down the village means walking away from environments that are harmful.
And finding people who truly see and value you.
Now, let's move on to our final story for today. This one takes us into the world of academia.
Academia, huh? That's a whole different kind of village.
Right. This one comes from the Only Reddit account, and it's about feeling overlooked by their family, even though they achieved a lot academically.
Like their accomplishments weren't enough.
Exactly. And there's another layer here. The Only Reddit account is transgender.
Okay, so there's more to this than just family dynamics.
They came out to their parents,
Yeah.
and parents basically brushed it off like it wasn't important.
Oh, man. That's gotta hurt.
Yeah, it shows how societal prejudices can even affect families.
It's sad, but it's true.
But there's a bright spot in their story.
Oh, good. What is it?
They met their future wife in the U.S., and it was like they finally found that acceptance they craved.
Love and support can be so powerful.
Totally. But even with her support, things with their family were still tough.
What happened?
Well, they went back to Ireland to finish their degree, and their sister was super hostile.
Wow. Why?
It seemed like she was jealous of their success.
That's so petty.
Right. But eventually, the Only Reddit account had this big confrontation with their sister and father.
They finally stood up for themselves.
Yep. Called them out on their behavior and the toxic environment.
Sometimes you just gotta clear the air, you know?
And in the end, they left Ireland and built a new life with their wife in the U.S.
They walked away from all that negativity.
Yeah, to a place where they could be themselves, with people who valued them.
That's a powerful message.
It is. And it brings us back to that idea that the village isn't always a physical place.
It's about the connections we make.
The relationships that lift us up. And sometimes, burning down the village means letting go of what's holding us back.
And building something better.
Yeah, it's like they found a good place, but there's still that, that hurt from the past.
It makes you think, right? Like, even when you build a new life,
Mm-hmm.
those old wounds can still, linger.
That's healing takes time.
Definitely not a quick fix.
We've covered some heavy stuff today.
Yeah, we have. From that daughter almost poisoning her brother to that retail worker taking on their whole management team.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the only Reddit account story about being transgender and facing rejection.
It's a lot, right?
It really highlights how much we all crave that sense of belonging.
That validation, yeah.
And when we don't get it, well, we see what can happen. It can lead to some, pretty destructive stuff.
It's a good reminder that we all need to be more aware, I think.
Mm-hmm. More
We're in a
exciting.
world where everyone feels like they belong.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day, think about this. What can you do to make someone feel seen?
To build a village that truly embraces everyone.
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been real.
We'll catch you next time.
See you.